Go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production. I'm Doug Cunningham. America's largest freight railroads, with billions of dollars profit since 2015, are trying to keep union worker wages lower than those won in past contracts while increasing health care costs for workers. The Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Division of the Teamsters Union represents more than 25,000 workers at CSX, Union Pacific, Burlington Northern Santa Fe, and Norfolk Southern Freight Railroads, among others. The union is in multi-employer bargaining, which has gone now into mediation under the National Railway Labor Act. Brotherhood of Maintenance of Ways' Don Griffin says here is what the union wants for these workers.
We want to make real wage gains for our members. We want to be able to hold the line on health care costs. Our guys already pay thousands of dollars a year for health care. And we are simply trying to get a fair and just agreement, given that we are dealing with some of the most profitable companies in the United States. You look at CSX, they are paying Hunter Harrison $400 million to be CEO of that company. These guys have plenty of money. It's unfortunate that those companies have taken the position that they want to pay less than inflation-maintaining wages, and they want to send health care for our members back to a level, something that you would get at Walmart. And it's extremely unfortunate. They could have had a deal here, but they chose not to get one.
Griffin says the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Division of the Teamsters will continue in mediation until the mediation board ends it, as the union continues to fight for a fair new labor agreement for freight rail workers. But the union says that voluntary agreement on terms acceptable to their members doesn't seem possible in this round of bargaining. National Nurses United are endorsing former NAACP President Ben Jealous for governor of Maryland. The Nurses Union says it's proud to endorse because of his inspiring vision for Maryland and his track record of activism and advocacy for social, economic, and racial justice. Jealous shares NNU's support of a Medicare for All health system. Jealous says he will work for a Medicare for All system in Maryland if elected governor. He says it's the best way to support families and small businesses who keep struggling to pay more for health care each year that provides less coverage as prices skyrocket. The nurses say they are eager to campaign for Jealous. WIN is made possible in part by the OPEIU, the Office and Professional Employees International Union. WIN is America's multimedia news voice for workers.
We need to make more money. You know, what they're paying us, the greedy corporations, they just want to pay us what they want to pay us.
Support WIN's worker news mission at workersindependentnews.com. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit workersindependentnews.com.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
Brothers, sisters, working class heroes, this is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. All you chicken hawks, well, it appears your boy's thinking war, or who knows what he's thinking. Evidently last night at a gathering at the state dining room at the White House, Trump surrounded by all of the military brass, all of the high muckety mucks, all of the, well, the mongers. And as he's surrounded by all of this brass and all of this military intelligence, he asks the handful of reporters, and again, it's one of those moments where you go, earlier in the day, a decision had to have been made, and he's twitching and dying to say, I've made a decision. But he asks this small group of reporters gathered around, he goes, you guys know what this represents? And he's looking at all of the people who are around him with the medals and all that. And one of the reporters goes, hey, tell us, what does it represent? Tell us what is banging around between those ears in that empty vessel. What possibly could you be talking about? He said, maybe it's the calm before the storm. And the reporters had to be going, what? What are you talking about? Calm. What? A second time, he reiterates, could be the calm before the storm. Now, understand, the press was told yesterday that there would be no more press availability, no more, the Donald's done, go home for the day. And then, like, last minute, later in the evening, come for a photo op. And, now the buzz is, what the hell is he talking about? What kind of what storm could you possibly be talking about? Considering earlier in the day that the claim is that they're going to decertify the nuclear agreement with Iran, could that be the storm? Could it be tomorrow we're decertifying no more and bombs at 5 o'clock? Is that what we're getting? Is it more of a storm in the Middle East? What storm are we talking about? He goes on to say, we have the world's great military people in this room. I will tell you that. Then he looked down the rows of the people all around, looked around, both sides. Thanks for coming. Tip your waitress. You go, what? And they're going, whoa, what storm are you talking about? Tell us. You can't throw this out there and have us for an entire night going, what the hell are you talking about? And he just simply responded, you'll find out. And you go, what? What are you talking about? I mean, here's the thing. I look at Donald Trump as probably with one of the greatest national security threats this country has ever had. And I have people say, well, he's unpredictable. That's a good thing. Maybe a little bit unpredictable is a good thing, but sane and rational have to go along with unpredictable, don't you think? On a small level, especially since you see the chaos at the State Department. Whether you believe it or not, and I believe it, whether you believe or not that Tillerson called Trump a moron, and I do believe it, he should have saved face. Honestly and truthfully, Tillerson should have saved face and admitted what we all know. He's a moron. Say it. You're going to get fired anyway. The clock is already ticking. You're already headed towards the door, Rex. And there's already talk of the replacement being this former, and you go, really? Mike Pompeo, the guy from California who just became CIA director? What is this, musical chairs? And you go, what? This is the world that we're going to inherit? And if that weren't bad enough, if the thought of, storm, whatever that means, maybe the next hurricane, I don't know. I don't know what he's talking about. I can only imagine the worst possible scenario, which is that Donald gets to blow off a couple of nuclear weapons and he, blows up. Never mind. Yesterday, House Republicans, again in their fashion, approved a sweeping budget resolution. They've dubbed it the most conservative fiscal statement in 20 years. Fiscally responsible. Now, understand the Senate Budget Committee, they're working on something equally as bad. They plan to bring it to the floor, I guess, later in the month. But we know, see, I don't even have to read the damn bill at this point to know exactly what the Republican priorities have been. And that's what they've been for the last 8 years. Only instead of, as they did during the Obama years, which is stomp their feet, hold their breath, and say, no! Like any good 2-year-old, now they're stomping their feet, holding their breath, and saying, Granny, you're screwed. Because we know what's coming. Massive tax breaks for the wealthy and an overhaul of the tax code. You know, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, they keep saying. And whenever I hear that, again, I tell my kids this. Whenever you hear that phrase, run. Because you usually only hear that from people selling timeshares or used car salesmen or people trying to sell you snake oil. Once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Have to act now. The pumpkin, the carriage goes back to a pumpkin at midnight. No more deal for you. This is what we're hearing from the Republicans. Once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get this wonderful tax thing, and you're going to be so thrilled with it. It's going to be tremendous. It's going to be great. It's fabulous. It's amazing. And what it is tax breaks for the very wealthy and increases in other things for everyone else. On the whole, understand, maybe you'll see a small tax cut, small, minuscule, on the level of the Bush cuts, $300, which people say, hey, $300 is a lot of money, and it is. But in the grand scheme of things, when you start talking about all of the other things that are going to be slashed and burned along with it, it's not a good deal for working people, because what they're talking about are massive, dramatic, just incredibly deep, painful cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and all of the quote-unquote entitlement programs. Just in food stamps, agricultural subsidies, and housing assistance, they're looking at $203 billion in cuts over the next 10 years. So food that we give to children who are hungry, taking food out of their mouth, literally, so we can give more tax breaks to the very wealthy. Those agricultural subsidies that they're talking about, school lunch programs, milk programs. Because understand, and I hope that we've come to a place where we get this. When they talk about agricultural subsidies, they're not talking about cutting funding to Monsanto or Archer Daniel Midland or any of these big agribusinesses, or the guy in Indiana who stood with Trump, who took like $4 million in welfare over the last 20 years. But he's going, no, it's those welfare mothers, those lazy, those parasites. I'm a producer. I deserve welfare. It's crazy. Understand, he's going to be fine. It's the working poor who are going to struggle the most. And on the housing assistance front, we're going to cut more money from housing assistance, which means more homeless people. And we know that. And they're okay with that. And they're telling you, we're okay with that. Tough luck, buddy. You're on your own, brother. We have to give those tax cuts to the very, very wealthy. We've got to. We've got to do it. Because they fill our pockets. They line our coffers. And this has to get done. Understand, something has to get done because the moneyed people ain't happy. Also, military budget's going to grow. Pentagon budget's going to grow. Again, not surprising there. Somewhere between $640 billion and the $603 billion that the White House has put. They want to still destroy Obamacare. That's still on the table. And I think they're just not worrying about doing the full repeal. They're just going to take the money out of it. They're just going to give the tax cuts away, which will inevitably destroy it. And then after doing all of this, After all of doing all this, they claim in 10 years the budget's going to be balanced. The budget's going to be balanced. We're going to give massive amounts of money to the wealth class. We're going to create an even larger, even more bloated wealth class. The handful will be, well, almost full. And everyone else, you're going to pick up the slack because they claim within a decade, balanced budget. Now, again, the projections that they make and the models that they use and the gimmickry that they come around with, really rosy projections for the future, but really just deep, painful, massive cuts to social programs and to our safety net. Bye-bye Medicare, bye-bye Social Security, bye-bye Medicaid, bye-bye investments in education and all of that stuff. Bye. In fact, what they're trying to do, again, as the Republicans love to do, the states should do it. Move it down to the state level. Knowing that it's not going to get done and they can just hoard what's left of our Social Security fund. And again, I go back to Reagan. None of this is new. We've seen this movie over and over and over again. One of the worst screw jobs ever to happen to the working class of this country was when Greenspan and Reagan convinced workers that Social Security was in big trouble. And the baby boomers were just going to destroy Social Security because they were the pig going through the python. And they were just going to eat up all of the Social Security money and it was going to be gone. So we had to drastically, enormously raise taxes on working people. Because understand, this year, I think it's $108,800 is where Social Security stops. You make over that, no more. You're good. You're good. Good for the rest of the year. You make $10 million a year, $108,800 back. You're done. Don't have to worry about that Social Security anymore. Where you could have said, you know what, we'll raise the tax a little bit. No cap. No cap. It's social insurance. It's to make sure that we have consumers and we don't have people living in poverty. And it's done that. It's done that very well. But really what they wanted to do back then, and they did it masterfully, as Republicans even today, they love to spend. Listen. We hear this frame all the time. Those tax and spend liberals, Rick. You're one of those tax and spends. I'm a tax and invest guy. Let's invest in things that we need: infrastructure, healthcare, education, the such. Our friends on the right, conservatives, are spenders, as I would argue, worse. They spend a lot more because you look at Star Wars, $1 trillion there. You look at a lot of these military things, $1 trillion there, $1 trillion there. What's a couple of $1 trillion between friends? Especially if it's just those working people's Social Security money. So what they do is they keep borrowing all this money from the Social Security Trust Fund. They basically, piss it down a drain. And sorry, we're broke. Now you've got to, hey, cuts. We need the cuts. We're saving the program. How many times you heard that nonsense? I mean, honestly, truly, when do we stop buying this? This budget is no better than any of the other Republican budgets that we've seen. I mean, it's maddening that someone would go, oh yeah, let's do this again. Let's pretend like we're cutting taxes again on the working class while we're giving massive tax breaks to the very wealthy under the guise of we're closing the loopholes so they're actually going to pay more. That happened all of 1 year. 1987, that was it. And after that, we gave the loopholes back and at a lower rate. And in some instances, we're actually paying corporations to be in this country. How nuts are we? And then we hear these idiots running around, I'm taxed enough already. Me too. I am taxed enough already beyond compare. And yet, we've got a party. We've got the Republican Party here who's just going on and on and on about how this is going to be great. It's going to stimulate the economy. Even though, again, I've seen the movie, seen the sequel part 2. The trilogy was there. We've seen all of these. And yet here it's back. It's like a bad zombie movie where we know what the ending is, yet we still sit through it. And I'm saying, now's the time to get up and walk out of the theater. Ask for our money back, because this is going to be another screw job. And this one's, I think, more serious than any of the other attacks, because the Democrats have no voice in this. They do this through budget reconciliation. It's over, man. And this is where 2018 is so important. This is why the anger, the frustration, is so important. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. We okay with it? Are we going to have... I've often said we should be trading our we should get billionaire trading cards. I keep wanting to do that, so that we can all have our favorite billionaire. We can follow our favorite billionaires, because, hell, we paid for it. It's our money. We might as well at least pretend like we're enjoying it, right? At least pretend. Love to hear your thoughts. And maybe, who's your favorite billionaire? Mine's always been Stephen Schatz Biscotti. Just what it is. Made his money the old-fashioned way, shipping my job overseas. Man, oh man. Quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1993. That was the day that President Bill Clinton signed into law reforms to the Hatch Act. The Hatch Act was passed in 1939. It limited the political activity of federal employees. The act was passed due to accusations of alleged political cronyism by Democrats on New Deal projects. Half a century later, Congress loosened the restrictions. In his speech before signing the reform, President Clinton explained the changes, saying, quote, "The Federal Employees Political Activities Act, which I am about to sign, will permit federal employees and postal workers on their own time to manage campaigns, raise funds, and hold positions within political parties. Still, there will be some reasonable restrictions. They wouldn't be able to run for partisan political office themselves, for example." President Clinton described the importance of the changes, saying, quote, "We've been supporting democracy throughout the world, but here in our own country, millions of our own citizens have been denied one of the most basic democratic rights, the right to participate in the political process." He ended his remarks by saying, quote, "I look forward to the infusion and federal and postal employee energy, expertise, and dedication into our political system that this bill makes possible." Today, under the regulations of the Act, most employees can assist in voter registration drives, attend fundraisers, contribute money, and distribute campaign literature. They can even run for office in nonpartisan elections. They cannot, however, use their jobs to influence elections or engage in political activity while on the clock. Today, there remains a balancing act between protecting the free speech of federal employees and keeping the government politically neutral. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Now the lessons of the past were all learned with workers' blood. The mistakes of the bosses we must pay for. From the cities to the farmlands in trenches full of mud. 'Cause war has always been the boss's way, sir. Come on! The union forever defending our rights. Let's fight the right wing, all workers unite. With our brothers and our sisters from many far-off lands. There is power in our union.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. So in the Harrisburg area, some good news. There's a job fair being held today and tomorrow at the Harrisburg Hershey. Because there's a lot of travel involved.
There is a lot of travel involved. You're going to have to travel at some point in time, And, younger people, obviously, we'd like to get them in, get them trained, but age is not a deterrent. As long as you're a hard worker, we're ready to help you.
Now, tell me about this training, because, look, the future, and I've been talking about this for years on the program, the future of the labor movement is in these kind of apprenticeship programs. And it doesn't matter if you're a construction worker, a truck driver, a nurse, it doesn't matter, an office worker, it doesn't matter. We all need to have our skills upgraded. We all need to have this mindset of continuing education. And I see this to be a really strong place for the labor movement. Tell me about the training.
What we're going to do, Rick, is we've rented some property over here by Reading, and immediately following the job fair, we are going to talk to the people about different types of skill trainings. We're going to work with Type 7 forklifts, which is a large pneumatic tire diesel-driven forklifts. We're going to work with Marukas. We're going to work with crew buses, and also some 2 tons and possibly some 1 ton training. We're going to train for the remainder of the month on this property down here. We're going to train 7 days a week. Some of our classes will be 2 days long. Some of them will be 3 days long. And then we're going to do some classroom stuff, too, starting next weekend. We're going to offer some a CSA and a defensive driving course along with all of this. So we're excited. We just hope we have continue having a great turnout like it started out to be here today.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is I would love to play around with those toys, just from a mindset of I'd love to drive one of these giant forklifts. But the reality is these are dangerous pieces of machinery where people, if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't have the proper training, it could be dangerous.
Oh, very, very much so. And it isn't about speed out there. It's about learning the proper way to handle the equipment, how to do it safely, and the efficiency and speed will come with more practice. That'll develop all on its own. We want you to do it safe. We want you to do it right. We want you to come home each and every night to your family. That's what this is all about.
No, I mean, at the end of the day, that's the bottom line. At the end of the day, you should go home from an honest day's work with a fair day's pay in the condition you went and back to your loved ones. Absolutely. But again, you come back to this training where I don't think you can get just anywhere, and I don't know that it's something you can go to the community college for. This seems to be an opportunity for people who want a good paying job, to get some skills and really to have a decent life, I would imagine.
It is. It's a great way, and it's not going to cost them anything. If you meet our criteria and want to move forward, we're going to spend our time and our efforts and our money to train these individuals and get them out into the construction field. I don't know where they can go anywhere else and get this type of training with no cost to themselves. That's the whole benefit of this program.
Well, I see. I think that's important. I mean, we live in a time right now where we're told we've got to go out and we've got to, get an education. We've got to improve our skills. And oh, by the way, there's a profit motive. What you're telling me is this is free, right?
This is free. Yeah, this will not cost these people a dime. If it's multiple day training and it's too far from you to travel back and forth from home, I'm going to pay for a hotel room for you the nights that you have to stay there. I'm going to provide you with a light lunch and stuff during the daytime. And, we're putting every effort forward to make this as painless as possible and to get people into the workforce.
Today and tomorrow, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Harrisburg Hershey Crown Plaza, downtown Harrisburg, 23 South 2nd Street. The Teamsters Job Fair brought to you by the Teamsters Labor Management Cooperative Trust. What is that? I mean, that's a great name. What is it?
Well, what that is the Teamsters Union has built this cooperative trust with the Pipeline Contractors Association. And there is a group of trustees, both from the union side and from the labor side and the contractor side. And they're the ones that decide that we're going to do these type of events and sponsor the training. And we work together hand in hand, not only to benefit our local unions, but to benefit our industry in a whole.
Now, we hear an awful lot in the mainstream media, especially from the right wing, about how unions and management have to butt heads. There has to be an adversarial relationship. But I look at this as, look, workers need jobs, employers need workers. It seems like a perfect solution in moving forward.
It works well, Rick. I'm so proud to be part of this organization. There's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that the common everyday person don't understand, but we do work hand in hand. And the end result, we want safely built projects. We want our membership to make money, and we want them to go home safe at the end of the day. The contractor wants that. Our local unions want that. I want that. And that's our main goal is to get our people trained the right way, the safe way, and let's go out and have a good project.
Yeah. How long is the training, from start to finish? How long basically is the training? And once you've completed the training, what do you step away with, and is there a job at the end of it?
The training, it depends. Like I said, we're going to do some forklift training. That's a 3-day, 30-hour class. We're going to do some Maruka training. That is a 2-day, 20-hour classroom. Our buses and 2 tons and 1 tons, that's a 2-day, 20-hour class. You're going to get a certificate of completion if you successfully pass the course. Just because you show up does not mean you're going to get a certificate.
Right.
You have to excel. You have to do it safely, and you have to do it right.
Yeah, we don't want somebody driving the big forklift, running everything over and putting the blades through stuff, right?
That is correct. I mean, if you're not safe, we're just going to stop you. That doesn't mean you're not the best crew bus driver in the world just because you can't run a forklift. We need to talk to people. That's what the job fair is about. We need to find out a little bit about your history, a little bit about your background. I do not believe in setting anybody up for failure. I want you to go out there. I want you to succeed. I want you to do your best. If you win, I win, and everybody's happy. And that's the whole name of the game here, is finding the right place for the right person and get them into the right job.
Good stuff.
Once they're done with the training, I will build a spreadsheet and pass it to all the local unions who are involved in the project. They're the ones looking for membership. They will be the ones calling them and putting them to work.
Okay, that sounds like at the end of it, there's a job probably waiting. And even if you don't, you still have this. You still have these skills. You still have this training, right?
Absolutely. Once you have it, you can't take it away from you.
The website, teamsterspipeline.com, is a place to go for some information. But today, tomorrow, at the Harrisburg Hershey Crown Plaza, downtown Harrisburg, 23 South 2nd Street, is this job fair. And look, Mike, good on you guys, good on the Teamsters for this. I think this is the kind of stuff that we need to be doing more of.
This is my second event this year. It's my third event total, and I'm looking forward to keeping this up. This is a win-win for the local communities, for local membership, and for the training fund in whole. So come on out and see us.
All good stuff. Mike, I appreciate the time, man.
Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
Best to you. And look, as I said, today, tomorrow, 8 a.m., 4 p.m., Harrisburg Hershey Crown Plaza there, downtown Harrisburg. Go take a look at what it offers. It's free. I mean, that's the thing. There's no thousands of dollars on the back end. It's an opportunity to get some free job training. Good stuff as far as I'm concerned. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1996. 15,000 workers at the General Motors plant in Quebec walked off the job. Members of the Canadian Auto Workers Union were frustrated with their wages. They were also angry about layoffs and General Motors' move to outsource some of the auto production to non-unionized labor. One striker explained, GM doesn't want to have 30-year people anymore. They want temporary workers who they can pay lower wages. The Canadian Auto Workers had won an agreement with Chrysler that guaranteed the company would not sell off any Canadian parts plants. But GM refused to make a similar promise. During the strike, the union reported that General Motors' $39 billion profit last year was the largest single corporate profit ever recorded in Canadian history. The union argued that much of this profit came from underpaying Canadian workers. Canadians only accounted for 8% of the company's North American workforce, but they generated 42% of GM's total profit on the continent. Soon, GM workers at other Canadian plants joined the strike, which swelled to 26,000 workers. As the strike wore on, its impact was felt beyond the Canadian borders. Thousands of GM workers in the United States were temporarily laid off. The parts they built were not needed because of the strike in Canada. It is estimated that 90,000 cars were not produced because of the strike. Finally, after nearly 3 weeks, the union and the company reached an agreement. The workers won a 2% annual raise in addition to their cost of living increase, but they also agreed that GM could sell off 2 of its plants and allow GM the right to do more outsourcing of parts from outside suppliers. And for that, the workers at those plants were guaranteed their wage level for 3 years. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Absence works. Maybe it's the way it's being taught or the way that it's being applied out there. But the fact of the matter is, it is the best form of to teach our children.
I wanna be a cowboy, and you can be my cowgirl. I wanna be a cowboy, and you can be my cowgirl.
Maybe,
I wanna be a cowboy.
maybe Tim Murphy should have listened to Rick Barry. Abstinence works. Oh gosh, yeah. Oh, that guy, you know, he was running for president. I'm not going to say he could have been, because there was no way, but still, he was running for president. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Abstinence works. Yes, it does, but not at the exception of reality. Just saying. New UNICEF data out. They point out that the U.S., one of the worst countries in the world for childhood hunger, or food insecurity, new buzzword. About 20% of American children live in households that are food insecure. When I was a kid, it was hungry. You went to the cupboards, and there was nothing. That wasn't insecure. That was just plain flat out hungry. Now the good thing is we're not the worst. Working on it. After the Republican budget, maybe. Lithuania, worse. Saudi Arabia and Uruguay, all worse. Those are considered high wealth nations with massive inequality, much like us. But there you go. Now, you look at Africa and some of the places like that, 70% of children there go hungry. And hey, if we work hard enough, maybe we can find our way there. And the thing that gets me, and this is one of my problems with my right-wing friends, especially someone like Tim Murphy, who we now find out is resigning, and it's not because of the abortion thing. That's part of it. That's part of the, the extramarital affair, the hey, yes, I'm anti-abortion except for me and my mistress. That's part of it. The bigger part, as Politico pointed out this morning, and I've actually heard this, there are a number of congressmen who are horrible to work for. There are a number of these dictator types who are just horrible to work for. He's one of them. And as they went through this story talking about they had a 100% turnover rate. Think about that for a second. Everybody who worked there quit. In fact, they had one guy saying to a potential job applicant, you don't want to work here. Unless you're going to be homeless tomorrow, you don't want to be here. How bad is it? How bad does it have to be when someone goes, really, seriously, I don't know you, but I like you enough to say, you don't want to be here. It's horrible here. Help me. Take me with you. How bad? And his chief of staff, a woman whose name I can't really pronounce, and I'm not going to bother trying to butcher. We'll call her Susan because that's her first name. Evidently, she even wrote a memo saying how bad things are. Wrote a memo to Tim Murphy saying, "Look, it's bad. Stop." Now, all of the people there are saying, "Look," the people who were left and who have been contacted said, "Look, this Susan, she was just as bad," which is how she became Murphy's right-hand person. And they even went into looking at some of the ethics and the irregularities in the couple there, because there are a lot of people saying that maybe there was something going on there, since it seems Mr. Murphy has some loose morals, if you will, especially. And this is the thing that gets me about the high and mighty, the pious, the do as I say people. They always tend to have this closeted side. It's interesting to me that the most vehemently anti-gay are the ones who are sniffing crack off the backside of a male hooker. Just saying. It's always curious to me that the most anti-abortion people are the ones who had abortions or are pressuring somebody else into having one. It's always been very curious to me. And I don't know what it is about this kind of self-loathing. This kind of self-loathing that these people have that make them horrible people. It's not just, look, we can disagree on ideas. We can disagree on policy. But I find when people are so extreme to one side, such an intolerant extreme, that they're basically horrible people, that you don't even want to be around in any other venue. And that, to me, has rung true time and time again. Look, there are conservatives that you can sit down, have an honest discussion and debate with. And you can discuss ideas. And there are those who are so intolerant and so incapable of understanding another point of view that it just devolves into this kind of, the gun issue is another one of these things where that's kind of their argument point. And look, when you come to a discussion and no is your only response, you're going to lose, and not even know you lost. And that's the scary thing. And we've really become this kind of country to where we look up to people like Tim Murphy. How many award dinners and how many events has he gone to where people have flocked to him? Oh, you're so wonderful. You're so pious. Oh, you're against abortion. You're a wonderful human being. And yet you find out, as all of this stuff was coming out anyway, evidently there have been a couple of potential ethics investigations coming along anyway. And this was just kind of the nail in the coffin. Because look, the reality is the House Ethics Committee was going to be investigating. And it was not on the abortion thing. It was on the horrible mistreatment of their staffers. And this was, again, because Murphy's in a incredibly safe district. In fact, the last two election cycles, Democrats didn't even run anyone. It was like, what's the point? Let me just put my own kick me sign on. And he is stepping aside. And you're retiring, midway through the term. Does that make? Yeah, it's my view, when it all starts coming out, it's going to be that ugly. And he's not the only one. That's the thing. Anyway, hey, abstinence works. We're just not teaching it right. Thank you, Rick. Quick break. I'm right back with Talk Media News. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them blue for me and you. And I say to myself, what a wonderful world.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day civil rights leader Fannie Lou Hamer was born in Montgomery County, Mississippi. She was the youngest of 20 children. Her parents were sharecroppers, and she began working in the fields at the age of 6. By the age of 12, Fanny had to drop out of school to sharecrop to meet the needs of her family. Marrying in 1944, she and her husband continued to work as sharecroppers on a plantation near Ruleville. After decades of abject poverty and Southern political repression, Fannie Lou Hamer joined up with voter registration activists in 1962. When she and 17 others traveled to Indianola to register, Fanny was fired from her job and driven from the plantation she had worked at for decades. She began working with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and played a central role in organizing Freedom Summer. In a short time, Fanny was repeatedly arrested, beaten, and shot at for her activism. She suffered kidney damage after police beat her near to death in a Winona, Mississippi jail as she traveled home from a literacy workshop. By 1964, she helped to found the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, which challenged the all-white delegation to the Democratic Convention. President Lyndon Johnson was so threatened by live testimony she was giving before the convention's Credential Committee that he organized an emergency press conference to preempt the broadcast. When the committee attempted a backroom deal to seat just 2 MFDP delegates with no voting rights, Hamer and other delegates left in disgust. Hamer continued her activism, but her life was tragically cut short in 1977 from hypertension and breast cancer. She was just 59. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
In the era of fake news, and you've got a president who everything is fake news. You got to love that the guy who's claiming fake news in every direction is out there spreading, well, fake news. He tweeted out yesterday, Ralph Northam, this was the tweet, Ralph Northam, who is running for governor of Virginia, is fighting for the violent MS-13 killer gangs and sanctuary cities. Vote for Ed Gillespie. And you go, wait a second. Really? He's all tied in with MS-13? Ed Gillespie himself, according to The Hill, reported that Gillespie's being criticized for putting an ad showing Northam alongside supposed MS-13 gang members. Only problem is the quote-unquote MS-13 gang members were actually prisoners from El Salvador. And at some point, do you not go, these people are lying at every step of the way, and hold them some bit accountable? Every person should vote against. He should get no votes for lying. That simple. Anyway, let's find out what's going on in Washington, D.C. and around the world. Michael Olesker, Talk Media News. Michael, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, listen, talk about fake news. Last night, Donald Trump had a gathering of military leaders at the White House, the Senior Leaders Conference. And he said this was the calm before the storm. And reporters said, "What do you mean? What do you mean? Are you referring to North Korea? Are you referring to ISIS?" He wouldn't say. We'll see. If any other president in this atmosphere had used that kind of language, it would have been, oh my God. But with this president, it's the whim of the moment, and you don't know when to take him seriously and when not. But he can't even say fake news here because he said it in front of the cameras. So we all got him saying it. We've all heard him, willfully or otherwise, making the country nervous. What the hell does he mean by this?
He's unpredictable, Michael. Unpredictable.
Well, he is unpredictable, and that's putting it in a very diplomatic way.
Neurotic, it would be another way. But here, I started off the show with the reality is, it's time for war. I mean, is this what this is? And the rest of the world's got to be listening to this going, what is he talking about? Because look, yesterday there was the news reports came out that he's decided to get away from the Iran deal. Does that mean we're decertifying at 4 o'clock, bombs at 5?
And what does that mean to North Korea? If you want to get them to sit down and negotiate and they see you walking away from the Iranian deal, do they say, well, obviously your word means nothing, so why should we sit down with you? And speaking of which, when, what was it, a week or so ago, when Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State, was trying to set up negotiations with North Korea.
Yeah.
And we had Donald Trump send out a tweet saying Tillerson was wasting his time. I mean, what was he, either undercutting the negotiation or playing bad cop, good cop? I don't know, and North Korea doesn't know either. And what's worse, Rex Tillerson doesn't know.
Yeah.
And look, this is, we're in a storm season here between Texas and Florida and Puerto Rico.
And
but
Washington.
The storm these days is over the Trump cabinet.
Absolutely. So the big question, Michael, did Tillerson call him a moron? That's the must-know news.
Well,
did he...
he went before the microphones yesterday. Obviously, we're told that Trump blew a gasket. He went volcanic when he heard this. And that Tillerson went before the microphones yesterday in order to kiss the ring, to make up with
Mistake.
the president. But when he was asked, did you say that, he would not deny it.
Okay, because I saw the State Department came out and said he doesn't use that kind of language. He would never say that about anybody. He didn't say it. The woman, made it to do about it. So I thought he had denied it. Wow. So I give him more credit because I said he should just save face and say, yeah, I said what everybody in the country and the world's thinking.
No, he said, I'm not going to deal in trivia like that.
Huh?
He would not deny it. And
because the clock is ticking on Tillerson,
Well, that's the thing. I mean, we now have, NBC reported that he threatened to resign over the summer, although he denies that. The Washington Post says they have 19 sources telling them that one way or another Tillerson is on the way out. Then, of course, the report of him calling Trump a moron, the North Korea thing with the tweeting. But look, he's just one guy in the cabinet. When I mentioned a storm over the cabinet, look, what was it, a week ago when Tom Price, the head of Health and Human Services, he had to leave because of the airplane scandal.
Yep.
Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, wanted a government plane for his honeymoon. He didn't get it. But we now have been, it's been reported in the New York Times, that Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, has flown on military aircraft 7 times since March at a cost of more than $800,000.
Yeah, no surprise there.
Including a $15,000 round-trip flight from Washington to New York and back to Trump Tower. The trains aren't running, the buses aren't running.
No. Look, Michael. The reality is, and you could go down the list. I mean, there's Zinke who's spent a ton of money, going to talk about ice conservation to hockey players in Las Vegas,
right.
To the EPA guy going back and forth, to this Shulkin guy, the head of the VA, who him and his wife went on a 50-50 business trip with a whole bunch of people. They don't want to be around us, Michael. They don't want to be around the rabble.
They don't want to be around the riffraff. You're talking about guys like you and me.
Exactly.
They don't want to be around us.
I am the rabble.
Yes, and me too, proudly so.
And the thing is, when you vote, you knew this when people were going to go and vote for Trump. There's no way. The New York Times just did a thing the other day. The first 100 days in travel expenses alone was like $32 million just for him and his family. How much water could we buy for Puerto Rico with $32 million?
Imagine. Now, here was a telling remark, I thought. Bob Corker, the senator from Tennessee, who seems to have found his voice since announcing his retirement. This is a guy who's not a verbal bomb thrower. He's a Republican. He said that Chief of Staff General John Kelly, Secretary of Defense James Mattis, Secretary of State Tillerson, they are, in Senator Corker's words, keeping us from falling into chaos.
Right.
And that is obviously a reference to President Trump.
No, absolutely.
What are we dealing with here?
No, I'm hoping. Look, I'm not a big fan of generals in government, to be honest.
But absolutely not.
Thank goodness, at least there's at least some semblance of sanity there. Because look, the unpredictable thing, I'm not buying. Crazy, more like it.
Well, it's a scary time to have this guy in the White House. We have this other report that the Secretary of Defense Mattis, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, and Tillerson, they have agreed to what they call a suicide pact, meaning if Trump tries to get rid of any of them, the other two would resign.
Wow.
That gives us some idea of the job security, the chaos inside the White House.
But honestly, truthfully, didn't we know this? I mean, didn't you know this before the election, that it was going to be musical chairs, and that because that's how he ran his businesses. So it's not surprising this is how he's running our government.
How many times have you and I said on the air, we knew things were going to be chaotic, but we never imagined anything like this?
Yeah. Now, there was lots of fun and speculation yesterday as well, with evidently Robert Mueller and his team met with the guy who did the dossier of the P-Gate.
The guy from MI6, the salacious stuff, as that's the euphemism that's being used. The danger there is not just that Trump, if that were to turn out to be true, that it would be humiliating for him, but that he had put himself in a place where he might be blackmailed by the Russians. And, of course, they're looking into that, and they're looking into the money trail. But that memo, which came out months ago, and at first it looked like they weren't taking it seriously, they are. Mueller is a serious guy. He has surrounded himself not just with investigators, but with prosecutors. And what that tells us is he's looking into the possibility of criminal indictments.
Yeah, I mean,
the Russia memo may tie in with this.
Yeah, but sadly, my belief is Flynn and Manafort, I think they're done. I think they're going to go down. I think you'll find a couple of low-level other people to fall on the sword. I don't think it rises to Trump. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think that Flynn might fall on his sword as a matter of a warrior does the right thing. Manafort, a man I see as being without scruples.
Oh, I don't think either of them fall on the sword. I think they're done. I think there's enough.
No, but I think that they talk.
Oh,
I think that.
Well,
you don't think
there's
so?
a good idea. That's possible too. But there are some who are saying that because of the state level charges, Manafort won't do anything without the state level charges going away, because that's the end of him as well.
Well, if they're dropped, he still might face federal charges. And if they were to go higher, all the way to Trump, Trump's not going to be in a position to take care of people like Manafort. He's going to be much more concerned with protecting people in his own family.
Yeah, keep Kushner out of prison.
I'm not sure how far his deal making is going to be able to go if, in fact, they get closer to him.
Yeah, I mean, this has just been nuts. And here's the thing. We still have a Republican Party who's still pushing all of the same bad ideas, and it's not getting the attention that I think it deserves because we're distracted with all this other stuff.
Well, in a lot of cases, that's Donald Trump's intention, distraction. And that's one more thing that he did last night, the calm before the storm remark. It's one more distraction.
Oh, absolutely. I tweeted out this morning the big picture of them in the Oval Office. I'm going, is this the last peacetime photo? Bombs at 5 o'clock?
Again, I think that if any other president made a remark like that, we would all be much more anxious than we are with this guy, because this is almost like, hey, look at me, surrounded by my generals. What a powerful guy I am. And this was a bit of verbal...
little grandstanding. Yeah,
grandstanding,
I get it.
Yeah.
But still, you're sending shockwaves through the world. And it's going to be an interesting weekend. Michael, I appreciate the time, man. Have a great weekend.
You too, pal. Take care.
Thanks so much, Michael Esker. Talk Media News. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production. I'm Doug Cunningham. America's largest freight railroads, with billions of dollars profit since 2015, are trying to keep union worker wages lower than those won in past contracts while increasing health care costs for workers. The Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Division of the Teamsters Union represents more than 25,000 workers at CSX, Union Pacific, Burlington Northern Santa Fe, and Norfolk Southern Freight Railroads, among others. The union is in multi-employer bargaining, which has gone now into mediation under the National Railway Labor Act. Brotherhood of Maintenance of Ways' Don Griffin says here is what the union wants for these workers.
We want to make real wage gains for our members. We want to be able to hold the line on health care costs. Our guys already pay thousands of dollars a year for health care. And we are simply trying to get a fair and just agreement, given that we are dealing with some of the most profitable companies in the United States. You look at CSX, they are paying Hunter Harrison $400 million to be CEO of that company. These guys have plenty of money. It's unfortunate that those companies have taken the position that they want to pay less than inflation-maintaining wages, and they want to send health care for our members back to a level, something that you would get at Walmart. And it's extremely unfortunate. They could have had a deal here, but they chose not to get one.
Griffin says the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Division of the Teamsters will continue in mediation until the mediation board ends it, as the union continues to fight for a fair new labor agreement for freight rail workers. But the union says that voluntary agreement on terms acceptable to their members doesn't seem possible in this round of bargaining. National Nurses United are endorsing former NAACP President Ben Jealous for governor of Maryland. The Nurses Union says it's proud to endorse because of his inspiring vision for Maryland and his track record of activism and advocacy for social, economic, and racial justice. Jealous shares NNU's support of a Medicare for All health system. Jealous says he will work for a Medicare for All system in Maryland if elected governor. He says it's the best way to support families and small businesses who keep struggling to pay more for health care each year that provides less coverage as prices skyrocket. The nurses say they are eager to campaign for Jealous. WIN is made possible in part by the OPEIU, the Office and Professional Employees International Union. WIN is America's multimedia news voice for workers.
We need to make more money. You know, what they're paying us, the greedy corporations, they just want to pay us what they want to pay us.
Support WIN's worker news mission at workersindependentnews.com. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit workersindependentnews.com.
Don't really care about the economy. Don't care much about democracy. I'm a member of the GOP, trying to form a plutocracy. But if I can just bamboozle you, and you'll share my narrow point of view, what a wonderful world this would be.
Oh, yes, what a wonderful world indeed. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So, is this the Trump effect? Look, you've had all of this chaos, this insanity coming out of Washington, D.C., and still, the economy did fairly well. And I've argued that, well, this is a reverberation from the stability and sanity. As slow as the growth was during the Obama years, still that kind of trotting along. The economy lost 33,000 jobs in September, according to the latest Labor Department report. And you got to go, I thought Bloomberg was saying we were going to create 100,000, down from the 169,000 last month. What happened? And that's kind of the question. That's why I've asked our good friend Mateus Vernango to come talk with us, professor of economics there at Bucknell University, also a fantastic blogger, nakedkeynesianism.blogspot.com. Mateus, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me, Rick.
So a negative 33,000 jobs. I don't remember there being a negative report recently. Am I missing anything?
No, it's been a while. It's been since the recession. But the justification, at least, well, these numbers can be revised, but the justification is the 3 hurricanes that hit the southern states in the U.S. and that sort of put a dent on service jobs down there, and that's what supposedly caused these negative numbers. Mind you, even if you wipe that out, still you would have a very a very small number of job creation below the 100,000 you suggested, and that's anemic as it is. So the slow recovery, continues, so to speak. But even by the slow standards of the recovery, it's surprisingly low.
Yeah, because I keep hearing the Trump people saying, look, we're the best people for the economy. We're going to do all these great things. And I keep hearing the Republicans saying more tax cuts for the very wealthy. They claim that's going to create jobs, more cuts to social services and Medicare and Medicaid, Social Security. That's going to be wonderful for the economy. And yet, I'm not buying it.
Well, there's no reason to buy it. I mean, in all fairness, it's very cynical. It's good for the economy means it's good for some people within the economy, not for everybody, certainly not for working class people. And that's always true about the economy. When people say the economy, they mean certain groups. The idea there is very cynical. It's the idea that if it's good for the wealthy, it's going to trickle down eventually to the very poor too. But there's no evidence of that. We all know that they've been selling this rotten fish for what 40 years now. The Reagan sort of voodoo economics all back. The tax cut is essentially the same thing. It's a big giveaway to the very wealthy. So as you suggested and what they voted yesterday in the budget, it's essentially perhaps the first achievement they're going to have in Congress, that they managed to pass tax cut. They failed at cut in Obamacare. But the point is exactly that. They're not good for the economy as a whole. They're not going to bring, in spite of all his talk of spending in infrastructure, in renegotiating NAFTA. I should say they've been renegotiating NAFTA. They have no agenda. They don't know what they want out of this. And there is no clear sense that they know what to do in order to improve the lives of working people. And
that's the scary part in all this, Mateus. I mean, look, I would renegotiate NAFTA probably a lot differently than they would. I think we need much stronger labor and environmental policies. I think we need to have some protections for workers and for small businesses. There's a lot of things we could be doing, but it's not what we're going to do, though.
No, in all fairness, I think this is going to be a missed opportunity for everybody involved. Mexican workers, and farmers also have sort of been dealt a terrible hand by NAFTA. So both, blue-collar workers in the Rust Belt and many peasants in Mexico have suffered with NAFTA. American corporations selling corn down there, and I don't think that anybody will be happy with what will happen in the renegotiations. It's essentially what Trump is capable of doing. He does show business. I'm not sure it's good show business, but it's show business. It doesn't have any content. It's empty of content. The NAFTA renegotiation, I think it's going to be a waste, as much as the whole talk of infrastructure. And to tell you the truth, sometimes when they do things, you're afraid of what they're going to do. We talked about this in other programs. The public partnerships. That public-private partnerships that he wanted to use for public investment. It's basically a giveaway to his friends, and the tax cut is the same. He promises that this is going to be good for everybody, but it's clearly a giveaway for people like himself, even. So
absolutely,
it's very, very nakedly, selfish. The whole endeavor. So it's a bit scary.
Well, as I've been saying, look, if it's not going to benefit you, show us your tax returns.
Yeah, I somehow don't think this will happen. I'm afraid of however, of how popular he among his base, obviously. Some of his positions remain, and on the difficulties and how it's still true that Republicans will go for restricting the franchise and voting, and how this can be a very long sort of nightmare that we're into. Will make Ronald Reagan look good by comparison.
Oh yeah, and look, I just had this conversation day before yesterday, and we were talking about the budget that the Republicans were about to pass. And I said, look, the Republicans have wanted to destroy Social Security from the beginning, and they've been doing it under this guise of we're saving it. We're saving it, Mateus. We're saving it by killing it. And they're getting away with it.
Yeah, that's traditionally, the solution for I mean, it's the starve the beast theory. They're going to make the deficits worse. I think one of the dangerous things here, not that you touched this, that the saving it's the way to bringing it down. What I'm afraid is how many Democrats buy into that discourse. The so-called serious Democrats.
Yep.
That, well, we have to give something to the people on the other side because we're trying to be reasonable. So if they're saying this, it's a position that it's valid. So there is some valid sort of notion that Social Security is broke, so we should reduce benefits, extend the period in which people have to work and contribute in order to get the benefits, and so on and so forth. All of those things are sort of introduced by reasonable Democrats that are trying to, save Social Security because it's still good and whatnot, and in the process of reforming, they water it down and eliminate it. And the same will happen with the deficit. I mean, these tax cuts will hugely increase the deficits over time and the debt. And then people will come back and say, you see, it's the bloated state, it's the Washington, bureaucrats and the special interests, by which they mean unions, and they're going to want to cut and cut and cut, and they'll cut social spending. And serious Democrats will buy into that discourse that the problem is the deficit and the debt. When the problem is not the deficit and the debt, or even the taxes, it's how we're taxing, how we're spending, and what kinds of deficits we're getting. So we could have higher deficits that we're having right now. The problem is that it's for what we're running those deficits. We're spending money on things that are absolutely unnecessary for people that don't need it.
Yeah, like the
Once
travel
in a
habits
while,
of,
because,
like the travel
because
habits.
Rex Tillerson is right, and the guy is somewhat of a moron. He says things that are right. So he says, for example, regarding Puerto Rico, we should wipe out their debt, and that tells you it's doable. It's not it's not something that's difficult to do, but his treasury person already walked back that. So that's the danger. I think the danger is that many people will buy into the discourse that we cannot do anything else, and that we certainly have to cut on social spending, and that's a sensible, reasonable thing to do.
No, I mean you go back to the Reagan era. When the Social Security fight is prime example of that. They sold us the pig and the python theory that we've got to save for the future, and they massively increased taxes on working people, obviously capping that just for working people, and over the next 30 years, we saw our debt just go completely out of line to where we weren't even, I don't even think $1 trillion in debt back when Reagan took office. And yet here we are, somewhere in the 20 trillion range, throwing in all of our investment as well with the treasury bonds and all that. It just seems that, look at all the tax cuts, all the money that we gave to the very wealthy, and look at all the debt that we've taken on. It just seems that there's something there.
Well, the Reagan story was about income distribution, and this is also about income distribution, although people don't understand it. The tax system has been used to favor, under the guise that if you give all of these breaks to corporate, taxes and loopholes to investment, there'll be a huge increase in investment, and people will go out and that will generate more growth, and it will eventually trickle down. But the evidence is out on that. I mean, it's not like so we know that doesn't happen, and there's a good reason for that. Why would corporations go and invest massively, and create plants and jobs and all of those things if the middle class is squeezed, over indebted, and cannot consume more than it does? So why would they expand the capacity to produce real stuff? So we have lived in an economy that's financialized, in which basically you have all of these corporate cats that have money to speculate on assets, and then we have sequences of bubbles. So probably right now with a bubble in the stock exchange, and that's essentially the nature of the economy since Reagan. So this guy is not making any changes on that front, and it tells you the sham that right-wing populism really is. It's fake. It's he complains about fake news. He's fake politics.
So are you saying that there's a big bubble on Wall Street that might go pop at some point in the near future?
Well, I don't know if it will pop in the near future. Those things are difficult to, but certainly, everything indicates that, that it's not a bubble that it's massive, like
the housing
like
bubble.
The two previous bubbles, the .com and the housing bubble. But at this point, the economy has not been growing particularly fast. But the Dow Jones keeps beating records over records, so we're above 22,000 or whatever is the number. And so, there's no particular reason for that other than there is a significant amount of corporate profit, after tax corporate profits are at all-time high. So they have lots of money and they can play with the money, but the effect of that on the real economy is nil. So
if we had stronger unions, we could actually fight for some of that.
If something like that pops at some point.
Yeah, if we had stronger unions, we could actually fight for some of those profits and higher wages. Just a thought. I did want to ask you a last question. I see you've got a new book out, Why Latin American Nations Fail, Development Strategies in the 20th Century. What's that about?
So, there has been over the last 20 years or so also sort of a discussion of why Latin American economies have sort of failed to catch up. And in conservative circles, a lot of that is predicated on the notion that we're not enough pro-business, so we don't have property rights and the rule of law. And provided we get the right institutions, we would sort of, pro-market institutions that protect investors and cut taxes and cut red tape would lead to a boom that as nobody else has seen in the history of the economy, and I think that misinterprets a lot of that is a misinterpretation of the Asian experience. So if you look at what happened in China, that it's still growing fast, or India, all of those economies, although they have liberalized in a sense, certainly from particularly China from the communist past, they remain very committed to industrial policies, to state intervention in creation and promotion of certain sectors in the economy, so that the problems of Latin America have less to do with not being pro-business, which in fact we have been significantly for, and we have integrated and accepted all the major free trade agreements that U.S. and many other developed countries had sort of put on the table. But the lack of our states to promote this development policies that in some parts of Asia have been sort of successful.
Interesting. Now, is this a book for general consumption, or is this an academic book?
It's more of an academic book. Or at least for people with some reading into issues of Latin America, I would say. So we intend to use it with my co-author in our classes. That's for sure.
Interesting.
But if people want to buy it, I'm not one to So it's University of California Press. Paperback is not that expensive. I think it's $20-something. So it's, they can give it a shot.
We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com and people can take a look at it. Mateus, I appreciate the thoughts. I appreciate the time.
Oh, thank you.
Always great talking with you. Again, check out his website, nakedkeynesianism.blogspot.com, and we'll also get a link to the book where you can maybe take a look at that. Quick break. Right back.
For jobs in Steel Town, for the working class. From Wall Street to Main Street, to the yet to be named street, child connect the dots and see we all live on the same street.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1993. That was the day that President Bill Clinton signed into law reforms to the Hatch Act. The Hatch Act was passed in 1939. It limited the political activity of federal employees. The act was passed due to accusations of alleged political cronyism by Democrats on New Deal projects. Half a century later, Congress loosened the restrictions. In his speech before signing the reform, President Clinton explained the changes, saying, quote, "The Federal Employees Political Activities Act, which I am about to sign, will permit federal employees and postal workers on their own time to manage campaigns, raise funds, and hold positions within political parties. Still, there will be some reasonable restrictions. They wouldn't be able to run for partisan political office themselves, for example." President Clinton described the importance of the changes, saying, quote, "We've been supporting democracy throughout the world, but here in our own country, millions of our own citizens have been denied one of the most basic democratic rights, the right to participate in the political process." He ended his remarks by saying, quote, "I look forward to the infusion and federal and postal employee energy, expertise, and dedication into our political system that this bill makes possible. Today, under the regulations of the Act, most employees can assist in voter registration drives, attend fundraisers, contribute money, and distribute campaign literature. They can even run for office in nonpartisan elections. They cannot, however, use their jobs to influence elections or engage in political activity while on the clock. Today, there remains a balancing act between protecting the free speech of federal employees and keeping the government politically neutral. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
So, yesterday, Politico ran a story under the headline, "Angry GOP donors close their wallet because, damn it, they want their investment." Hey, they paid the bribe money. They scratched the itch. It's time for payback. And they're ticked. And we've heard this for some time now. You know, originally the Koch brothers came out a couple months ago saying, unless we get our repeal and replace and we get our tax cuts, nothing. Evidently, there was a shindig recently at the home of Los Angeles billionaire Robert Day. Big shindig, couple of dozen guests who, look, not happy at all. In front of 24 guests, you had the retired oil and gas investor and big money donor Tom Wechtel, who said, look, anybody who is out there knows I'm not happy. I don't think anybody was happy. How could you be? He's given a ton of money to McConnell and these other folks. You're never going to get a more sympathetic Republican than I am, but I'm sick and tired of nothing happening. I want something. Yeah. And you go down the list of all of these crazy, these big money people who've given, and this is the thing that's always amazed me. They're talking about, these billionaires who are giving like $2,000 to a senator. And it's like they expect all of this in return. And it's one of these things where you just go, at some point you have to get money out of politics. Now, one of the people there, this guy named Dan Eberhart, energy executive from Houston, he said, quote, when you're in a business and you tell your stakeholders we're going to build a building or something, you have to follow through. He says, I can't borrow money and build a building and not follow through. That's what these guys are doing. And I'm going, hold on a second. Hold on. They're not borrowing money. You're donating to a campaign. And I think, that one statement in itself, to me, exemplifies how the wealth class views our politicians. Something to be bought, something to be bribed, something to be purchased, much like our democracy, for their whim and their will. Now, he's ticked off because, well, you didn't repeal and replace that Obamacare. Now, this is a guy who's a freaking billionaire. He is never going to not go without health care. And yet his issue is pushing a health care repeal that would take health care from 30 million people. because he wants a bigger tax cut. You've got someone like Sheldon Adelson, who Politico points out, he's ticked because we haven't moved the the embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. You've got, someone like this Iowa agribusiness mogul, this Bruce Ratsetter, who's all ticked off at Grassley and Ernst and said he's not doing anything, no more money until we get new legislation passed or new leadership. And the thing is the fundraisers are losing their minds because they're not even able to set up meetings with their big donors. It used to be a cash cow. You had a Rolodex of these really wealthy people, and it was just cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. Turns out, according to the North Carolina Senator Tom Tillis, who is the National Republican Senatorial Committee the fundraising guy, evidently the committee brought in July and August about $2 million. In July and August, $2 million, half of what they raised in June. So in June, you got $4 million. $1 million in each July and August. Like I say, it's summertime. People were on vacation. Check writing hand was a little sore. Not so. Not so, because look, at the end of the day, they want what they want. They want what they bought. And again, this is kind of that quid pro quo thing. We give you money, you give us what we want. And it's always, again, been one of those things curious to me, a couple of $1,000 donation, huge windfalls. Huge windfalls. We're going to donate a couple of grand to your campaign, and we're going to get a tax cut that's going to bring us hundreds of thousands. And this is where you keep going, while we still can vote. Honestly, while we still can vote, we should, in large numbers. And for people who are going to, one, be honest, and two, give a rat's behind about the average person and actually understand what the average person goes through. I look at what's going on in D.C. right now. I look at what's going on with the Trump administration, and you look at all their lavish travel, and you look at all of the spending and all of the stuff that they're doing, without thought of optics, without thought of anything. Because, hey, they're slumming it. Understand, Trump was very clear. The White House is a pig pen. For him, it's slumming it. So we've got to go flying to Bedminster or flying to Mar-a-Lago or flying to Trump Tower or whatever. Because we're not staying in that hellhole. We're better than that. And it's always been curious to me that someone's going to look at Donald J. Trump and go, that guy gets me. That guy knows what the struggles of, not being able to get a new pair of shoes for my kids this week. They know the struggles of, science projects coming up. I'm going to have to spend $50 that I don't have on materials. Healthcare bill came up. Kid fell and scraped his knee. Had to go to the doctor. My daughter, for instance, she runs cross country. She passed out. It was an ungodly hot day. And I'm like, why are you even running on a day like today? She passed out. So immediately had to take her to the emergency room because the school mandated, gotta go now. So we went over to the emergency room. And it was what I thought it was. Look, she was exhausted. It was hot. She didn't drink enough. She didn't eat lunch. Of course you're going to pass out. These things pop up. Something that I don't know that the Trump clan gets. And yet here we are in a scenario where people who don't understand what it's like to live the lives of working people are making law and making policy that's only going to make it worse. Scary, angering times, my friends. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Isaiah Poole, Campaign for America's Future, is going to be here, and the People's Action Institute. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Pump it down.
Well, the computer just went weird. Don't you hate when you do things that you go, wait a second, I hit the wrong button again, and well, here we go.
Standing up to conservatives and corporatists every weeknight. The Rick Smith Show.
So now you see the light. Hey, stand up for your right. Come on, get up, stand up.
A real catastrophe like Katrina.
Trump downplays the disaster in Puerto Rico. U.S. taxpayers give the fossil fuel industry $20 billion a year in subsidies. Scotland bans fracking. Plus,
let's be blunt. This is your tax dollars at work.
Hidden costs of climate change costing U.S. hundreds of billions a year, and it's getting worse.
All of that fantastic news and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
As our EPA chief keeps telling desperate coastal mayors, this is not the appropriate time to talk about climate change. The appropriate time will be when we're all on a space station trying to figure out how to turn our poop into protein bars.
Getting close. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, even though Donald Trump seemed to be downplaying the disaster in Puerto Rico, the death toll is quickly moving up.
Yes, it is. The governor of Puerto Rico on Tuesday raised the official death toll from Hurricane Maria to 34. That's likely to rise as federal disaster relief slowly begins to reach remote areas of the island that have been cut off since the storm hit 2 weeks ago. FEMA officials report that 7% of Puerto Rico now has electricity, with hopes to restore power to a quarter of the island by the end of October.
And yet Donald Trump, when he went down to Puerto Rico this past week for a couple of hours, told the people there, oh, they don't need flashlights anymore.
Yeah, it was bizarre. In remarks during his short visit to Puerto Rico on Tuesday, President Trump suggested Puerto Ricans should be doing more to help the federal government amid the devastation caused by Hurricane Maria, and he downplayed its magnitude.
If you look at a real catastrophe like Katrina, and you look at the tremendous hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that died, and you look at what happened here with really a storm that was just totally overpowering. 16 people versus in the thousands. You can be very proud of all of your people, all of our people working together.
And then he chided the 3.5 million American citizens in Puerto Rico for the cost of the disaster.
I hate to tell you, Puerto Rico, but you've thrown our budget a little out of whack because we've spent a lot of money on Puerto Rico.
But 2 weeks after Hurricane Maria, FEMA still has not yet authorized full disaster aid for the island. After Hurricane Harvey, FEMA granted full disaster funding for Texas within 10 days.
Well, I think we know what the difference is between Texas and Puerto Rico, don't we?
And now a new study warns the cost of these disasters is going to get much worse.
Of course it is.
According to a new report by the Universal Ecological Fund, over the last 10 years, extreme weather disasters plus the health impacts of air pollution from burning fossil fuels have already cost the United States $240 billion a year.
A year?
Yes. Now, 2017 has already topped that. Economic losses from the 3 major hurricanes plus 76 wildfires in western states are estimated at $300 billion. The researchers project that future climate shocks could cost the U.S. nearly $1 billion a day in coming years.
Wow, you'd think Republicans who claim to be fiscal conservatives would care about that thing if there were any actual Republicans who actually are fiscal conservatives.
Craig Fugate, FEMA director during the Obama administration, in a conference this week, warned that the economic losses caused by 3 major back-to-back hurricanes in just a few weeks should be a wake-up call.
And not only is climate disruption driving the cost of disasters, but we have been pricing risk in this nation so low that we're not changing behavior, and we're encouraging growth in high-risk areas and putting both vulnerable populations and your tax dollars at risk.
Meanwhile, U.S. taxpayers are already spending $20 billion a year to subsidize the fossil fuel industry. That's through a mix of tax breaks, loopholes, and infrastructure support, according to a new report by Oil Change International. Plus, a new analysis in Nature Energy concludes that Without that $20 billion in annual taxpayer subsidies, half of current U.S. oil production would be too costly to drill at current oil prices, and that taxpayer subsidies help pad oil companies' profit margins and induces them to drill even more.
And yet, whenever any kind of subsidies are given to renewable energy companies, Republicans say we shouldn't be picking winners and losers.
Finally, Scotland has banned the controversial drilling technique of fracking. They say because it threatens their drinking water supplies and impacts Scotland's targets to cut carbon emissions.
Smart people in Scotland. I am moving. For all of those stories and more that we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. You can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes. And find us, follow us, and share us worldwide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Mama, if that's moving up, then I'm moving out.
So bad. Everybody seems to nag me. Coming Tuesday, I feel better. Even my old man looks good. 'Cause Wednesday it's go so slow. Thursday, I don't know. I got money on my mind.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So new Pew Research Center data come out. New poll yesterday released. Interesting finding, 74% of us believe that there is solid evidence of warming. Yes, climate change, real. Highest level since Pew's back in 2007, that report. 92% of Democrats, 52% of Republicans. Huge party divide. Reality is Republicans are coming around a little bit more. In fact, 52% is the high from 39% in 2014. Still below where it was a decade ago, which makes you wonder what happened to the Republican Party. Now, interestingly enough, 24% of Republicans polled said that they think that the global warming and human stuff actually makes sense. Nearly 80% of Democrats believe that we, the people, are having an influence on the climate. Interesting, on the other side, thanks to FEMA, we now not going to know what's going on in Puerto Rico because they're not putting anything else up on their website. So, good stuff. Anyway, here to talk about that, and we'll bang around some other ideas, our good friend Isaiah Poole, Campaign for America's Future, also the communications director at People's Action. Isaiah, thanks for taking time for us.
Very much appreciate that.
So, I look at this, we're climate change kind of coming around maybe a little bit after these massive hurricanes have just basically wiped out an entire island.
Yeah, but here's the bad news. The Trump administration this week, there are reports that it plans to eliminate something called the Clean Power Plan. And that was what was instituted by the Obama administration to encourage power plants around the country to shift to cleaner and more ecologically beneficial sources of energy, to encourage the shift to solar, to wind, and other sources of power. President Trump campaigned doggedly on this idea that somehow burning coal and reviving the coal industry was somehow essential to our energy future, when in fact we know that coal is very detrimental to our planet. Burning these fossil fuels contributes to global warming, and obviously the fact that we had this year 2 Category 5 hurricanes literally within days of each other, is a symptom of a warming planet. So the Trump administration, in the face of that, and in the face of public opinion, is dismantling, starting with the Paris Accords, withdrew from that, is trying to kill the Clean Power Plan. Scott Pruitt is doing everything that he possibly can to destroy the Environmental Protection Agency. I mean, it's amazing the extent, the lengths to which the Trump administration is going to contribute to the problem of global warming rather than to solve it.
Yeah, I mean, it's nuts. And you look at the being proud of the fact that they're rolling back a lot of the sane regulation on the same policy that the Obama administration tried to put into place, knowing that the future is coming. You know, one of them being, you know, just from a common sense point of view, you look at what's going on in Puerto Rico, and I've been saying, you know, this is an opportunity to maybe, here's a thought, you know, build in a way that for the future hurricanes, we can withstand them so we don't have to start over again. You know, have better floodplain building codes, have better policy, repeal that.
And the other thing that you can do in Puerto Rico is actually build a power network that won't be totally decimated by the next hurricane. The beauty of solar, for example, is that it's decentralized. The fact that you're you know, if somebody, you know, you're not dependent necessarily on the big central power plant. If that goes out, you still have your individual solar panels. And the grid can be configured so that a catastrophe in one part of the island doesn't affect the whole island. Those things are possible.
But again, all these things are possible. It's a matter of, do we have leadership? Do we have the political will? Is the Republican Party willing and able and capable of dealing with the problems that we know are coming? And the answer is no. They're the party of tax cuts. That's all they know. They got one tool in a box, and it's a hammer, and they keep beating us over the head with it.
Yes. And in fact, that one tool that tax cuts is arguably one of the reasons why Puerto Rico was in the shape that it was in before the storm, because there was an effort to make Puerto Rico a corporate tax haven, particularly for pharmaceutical companies. And one of the interesting dynamics that happened was that when there was a wave of tax favors that were done in Puerto Rico for the benefit of the pharmaceutical industry, a lot of pharmaceutical companies moved their production operations to the island and kept them there until the tax breaks were done. And then a lot of them left. And now a lot of the ones that remained have now been, unfortunately, been wiped out from the storm, and we've got some drug shortages as a result of that concentration of medical manufacturing infrastructure on that island. That was an interesting article in the New York Times about that this week.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you just look at this and nothing good. What we got out of Trump from Puerto Rico is a nice towel throwing. Like you're at a ball game, you know, Isaiah. Here's a free T-shirt. Here's some towels for you.
The only thing that was missing was the gun to fire the towels into the crowd.
Exactly, and you know, if he had one of those, you know, he'd blast somebody right in the face with them.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us were flabbergasted at that particular photo op, but you know, what's even more flabbergasting, and I was actually overseas over the past weekend when Trump visited Puerto Rico, and but boy, was that from the sequence of him, the attacking the mayor of San Juan, all the way through that towel throwing exercise.
Or telling the couple, "Hey, have a good time. Have a good time."
And telling, to have the good time comment, exactly.
Yeah,
well, this was a demonstration that Trump has lowered the bar for worst president ever. In ways that I think, frankly, many conservatives are ashamed.
I hope so. I got to be honest. I hope so. Let me ask you, since you were overseas, what was the response? Because, they had to know you're an American. What's the response to what's going on here? What's their response?
Well, I was in the Republic of Georgia, which many people.
Say no more.
It's in the shadow of Russia. Georgia was, in fact, a Soviet republic until the breakup. And I tell you, the thing that I heard most often from people when we talked to politics was the fact that the political situation in Georgia is rather tenuous. And there is a fair amount of corruption, and they've got the similar issues with a 1% group of millionaires and billionaires that control the politics in that country. And they are very concerned that Trump's behavior gives politicians in that country license to act in corrupt and oppressive ways that they would not feel permission to do otherwise. In other words, we have set an example of deviancy, of normalized deviancy. And, it's the opposite of what we have been told America must be, which is the shining light to the world, the moral example for the rest of the world to follow. We are setting an example that is giving other leaders permission to ignore the concerns of people at the bottom of the scale, to ignore human rights, to ignore pleas for equality. There is a sort of a nascent LGBT movement in the Republic of Georgia that is fighting for recognition. Right now there's nothing in the United States that gives them hope.
No, I mean, you look at what's coming out of Jeffy and out of this administration. No, there's nothing positive.
Well,
there.
The Department of Justice has just announced that it does not consider people. It does not consider that transgendered people are protected by laws that protect people against sex discrimination. It's a fundamental misunderstanding or refusal to understand what gender identity is all about.
Well, I just think they don't care. I mean, that's the.
Well, they don't care.
I mean, that's not our problem, not our fight. And to be honest, look, honestly, truthfully, it's not my fight either. But I do understand that if we allow one person to be discriminated against, exploited, mistreated, harassed, whatever words you want to use, eventually it comes for all of us.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think we can. We certainly cannot. I don't think anyone can really feel secure in a world where we unleash discrimination based on religious beliefs, like we're about to do, for example, with the birth control ruling. Again, another example where private companies are going to be given the ability to not provide birth control coverage to their employees based on religious belief. And my question always is, well, where does that stop? Where does the line go?
Well, I mean, just reported today that the Trump administration is actually broadening that exemption for religious or moral objections. And look, the Department of Justice is supposed to be the ones who are the ones that enforce this. This idea of a moral objection instead of a religious test is a huge part of this. But also, we've got a Supreme Court who's going to uphold this kind of stuff. Because look, as You know, if people of the same sex want to get married, I'm anticipating very soon the Supreme Court to say no cake for you.
That's my fear, and I understand some of the concerns that were raised by the baker in that particular case, who thinks of himself as an artist rather than a baker.
No, he doesn't.
Still,
That's a lawyer trick. That
well,
didn't come out of his mouth.
Well, but I think what I was about to say is that what Trump said is that you're providing, you're engaged in commerce, you're engaged in private business, you're engaged in a business of serving the public. In other words.
Yep.
And we fought long and hard battles to make sure that public businesses could not pick and choose who they serve based on the color of their skin or their gender and now their sexual orientation. And, we can't go backwards on that.
No, but here's the thing.
Because, this is what it means. Let's think about what it means to live in a pluralistic society in which all of us are treated equally. All of us are respected. All of our lives are treated with value.
All right, I'm thinking about it.
We just can't keep doing these things. We can't tolerate these kinds of things where we have our leadership in the White House saying, well, if your sexual identity isn't what we think it ought to be, you can't serve in the military. And, oh, by the way, if you get a private sector job and they decide to fire you because they don't like the fact that you're somewhere between the spectrum between all male and all female, we're going to we're going to fire you.
Yeah, there's the curb. It's a scary world that we're heading towards, Isaiah. It really is, and that's why it's so important to stay active, to stay engaged, and to stay back into the streets. Anyway, I hope you have a great weekend. I appreciate the time and the thoughts, and look forward to talking to you again next week.
Absolutely, we're going to keep up the fight.
Good stuff, Isaiah. Appreciate the time, man.
All right.
Our good friend Isaiah Poole. You want to check out his website? We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com. Communications director there at People's Action. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Help the poorest folks, but it only brought more money to their hands. And the poor keep getting poorer, people turn away, not able to admit the way they planned. It's taking all the soul away from everything they grew. They can't have no link on which to stand.
Uncovering the con in conservatism. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day civil rights leader Fannie Lou Hamer was born in Montgomery County, Mississippi. She was the youngest of 20 children. Her parents were sharecroppers, and she began working in the fields at the age of 6. By the age of 12, Fannie had to drop out of school to sharecrop to meet the needs of her family. Marrying in 1944, she and her husband continued to work as sharecroppers on a plantation near Ruleville. After decades of abject poverty and Southern political repression, Fannie Lou Hamer joined up with voter registration activists in 1962. When she and 17 others traveled to Indianola to register, Fannie was fired from her job and driven from the plantation she had worked at for decades. She began working with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and played a central role in organizing Freedom Summer. In a short time, Fannie was repeatedly arrested, beaten, and shot at for her activism. She suffered kidney damage after police beat her near to death in a Winona, Mississippi jail as she traveled home from a literacy workshop. By 1964, she helped to found the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, which challenged the all-white delegation to the Democratic Convention. President Lyndon Johnson was so threatened by live testimony she was giving before the convention's Credential Committee that he organized an emergency press conference to preempt the broadcast. When the committee attempted a backroom deal to seat just 2 MFDP delegates with no voting rights, Hamer and other delegates left in disgust. Hamer continued her activism, but her life was tragically cut short in 1977 from hypertension and breast cancer. She was just 59. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Making the blue bloods see red. The Rick Smith Show.
Back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So, 20 states across the country are attributing the increases in premiums for Obamacare next year to the Trump administration, to Republicans in Congress who, look, as I said all along from the beginning of the year, what the Republicans are doing, and masterfully, whether they pass anything or not, they're creating the doomsday that they're dreaming for. They're creating an environment of uncertainty. And you remember during the Obama years how the Republicans used to scream about, you're causing uncertainty. Employers don't like uncertainty. You're right, they don't. And what these 20 states are saying is, look, that uncertainty that you've created of constantly saying, we need to repeal, we're going to repeal, and we're going to replace, and it's going to be miserable. Millions of people are going to be uninsured, and insurance companies are going, hey, we just finally adjusted our models to figure out how to rate this. We finally figured this out, and now you're going to pull it out from under us? The group Protect Our Care came out with this study. They analyzed 28 states where final state-approved rates are now public, and they found that 20 of those states specifically cite the increases as caused by the Trump administration. Now, here's the thing that's really scary, because the Trump administration evidently has been making payments basically on a month-to-month basis to these insurers for the subsidies. And as I've been saying, the easy way to destroy this is just pull the subsidies out. You take the subsidies away, it's just now a place to buy private insurance that is just outrageously expensive. But not all that much different than you'd go into the private market anyway. The idea of creating a large pool made sense to me, and this is where the public option was, in my view, a must. It was an absolute. You could have made Medicaid the public option, but they chose not to. They chose to go the conservative Republican route of, hey, let's just create a website with a bunch of marketplace things, and on a sliding scale, and this is the progressive part, based on your income, we'll give you subsidies to help you pay for the private insurance. The fear is the Trump administration says, yep, next month we're not making any more payments. And that could happen. And look, you can take them to court, you can go and sue, you can do all that stuff. Reality, 1-2 months without the subsidies, most people are going to lose their health care. It just is what it is. And we're going to be right back, and actually in a worse position than we were before the Affordable Care Act. And again, this is right into the Republican playbook. Never let a good crisis go to waste. And oh, by the way, create the good crisis, which is what they've done in at least 20 of the 28 states. I would probably argue all of them. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens with it next year, because look, the repeal people aren't going away. In fact, the repeal is going to be louder next year. It's going to be a campaign year. Scary, scary, ugly stuff. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Hope you have a great weekend. See you back here on Monday. I'm still waiting to see what kind of insanity. I'm waiting to see what the storm is. Bombing at 5 o'clock? I sure hope not. Have a good weekend. We'll see you back here Monday.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email Rick at thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. It's coming.